Last year for PAX, Bethesda did something a little bit different, and they kicked off what they were calling the Bethesda Gameplay Days. Now, they did this for both PAX East and PAX West, and I was lucky enough to be a part of both of those events last year. Essentially, what Bethesda does is they find a location near PAX, but separate from PAX. They rent it out, and they spend the entire weekend celebrating all things Bethesda. They also put on panels live at the event. People can walk around, try their different games, see stuff that's coming, so on and so forth. Now, this year, Legends, for the PAX East version of Gameplay Days, had a panel, and they revealed a lot of news. A lot of things that are going to be happening in the near future, and they talked about some stuff coming later this year. So this video is going to be my way of kind of recapping it in case you missed the news, and also talking about some of the stuff that they did reveal. And the first and foremost thing I want to cover, because it's on everybody's mind and it's the most exciting thing and it's also the nearest in the future, is the confirmation of the next expansion. This expansion is Alliance War, and it's coming April 15th, and we are going to get the other 5 color combinations for tricolors, if you will. So for the 3 color decks, all of the versions that you could not build before, you will be able to build in this upcoming set. So everybody is pretty excited. Now, that being said, there is also something else that was actually not mentioned during the panel, but has been confirmed on Reddit, and that is that with this expansion, we are also going to be getting duplicate protection. Now, the announcement of duplicate protection is incredibly timely because we got news of a lot of content coming our way over the course of the next year. I'm going to go ahead and put the roadmap that was shared up on the screen right now. Alliance War is the first of 4 pack-based expansions we're going to get over the next year. Now, that's a lot. And there are some players who are talking about the free-to-play experience and how this might be too much for that. Only time will tell, because Legends has been pretty free-to-play friendly in the past. I think duplicate protection will go a long way toward helping that. But this is good news if you do not like content droughts. If you are like me and you love brewing and coming up with new stuff and you get really excited about new cards, the idea of 4 expansions coming over the course of the next year is like Christmas, or like letting me be a kid in a candy store, whatever metaphor you want to use. I'm really excited, but again, if you're a free-to-play player, there might be some cause for concern. It does sound like these expansions might be a hair smaller. During the announcement, they said that Alliance War is going to be around 100 new cards, which is a step down a bit. Morrowind was 149. So if it's 4 expansions, but they're all also just, you know, a little bit smaller, if they're like 2/3 of the size, that's also going to impact your rate of acquisition. But just consistently getting an influx of new content and cards, I think, will really help smooth things out and really help keep the meta shifting. You can see here, it does mention we're still getting monthly reward cards. We're also going to get monthly patches and some balance updates along the way, like we've grown to expect. They're still going to do alternate art cards, new card backs, so on and so forth. Now, one interesting tidbit as you look at this, for expansion 2, in the like features area, they mentioned that there's a new playmat and new mechanics, but expansions 3 and 4, they don't have that subnote, so that tells me they're already well on their way to working on expansion 2, at least far enough that they know new mechanics and new playmats are coming. So it sounds like Sparky Pants has been hard at work from the design standpoint, and I'm excited for that. You might also see the Master Series mentioned there. That's right, Master Series is coming back, and it's going to be finals at QuakeCon again, $50,000 prize pool again, $20,000 going to first place. There's a lot to be excited about when discussing the future of the Elder Scrolls Legends. This roadmap shows us they're committed to the game long term. I think that they're finally feeling comfortable with where the client is, feeling comfortable about how the developer switch has went, and they are ready to just focus on the game and content, and that's exciting. But nothing is as exciting for me as new cards, new content, new theory crafting, thinking about all the different things that you can do. The panel showed us 9 cards from the new set. Then today on his stream, Matt Oblivium also revealed a new card, so we know 10 cards so far. I'm going to talk about each of the cards, and whether or not they're good or bad, it's going to be subjective, because the truth is you can't really say whether a card is good or bad without the context of the full set, but it's always fun to kind of think about ways that you could use them. I'll also tease the art for the card that I'm going to reveal tomorrow. So on stream tomorrow, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time, I'm going to reveal a card from Alliance War as well. I will also put up a YouTube video like I always do, so you can look forward to that. But let's just start with the reviews. Let's go ahead and take a look at Guildsworn Apprentice. This is the first card that has been revealed, and this is a 2-cost 1/2. It has Prophecy, Guard, and Summon, draw a card. That's a lot of effects on a 2-cost creature. There is a lot going on there, and worth noting, this is part of the Strength, Intelligence, Willpower 3-color combination. Now, I've mentioned it a few times in the video already, but we are getting all of the 3-color combinations that were remaining in the set. So all 10 tri-color combinations will be possible when Alliance War releases. This card is interesting because I think that it has the potential to fit in both an aggressive archetype and in a more combo or controlling archetype. So on the combo side of things, anytime you can play something that draws a card, that helps you find your combo, so that's fun. On the controlling side, this has Guard, this has Prophecy. Both of those are very good in terms of trying to help you stall the game. Drawing a card means that you get your resource extension. And this is interesting because it's a 2-cost creature, so naturally, even though I hate saying this out loud, you have to consider something like Tullius Conscription when you look at this card. That is going to be relevant potentially, and something that we have to think about. Now, the reason I mentioned aggressive archetypes is that even though the stat line is not great on a creature like this, this does represent all 3 colors. We have got confirmation, and we'll get to see one a little bit later, that Oathman are returning for all of the 3-color combinations that have not existed. So if, for example, the Guildsworn Oathman is something that is very, very playable, this could be just as important as, like, say, Belmora Puppeteer is, in terms of getting something cheap on the board that you can use to trigger your Oathman. So that might be relevant. It's also relevant because it draws a card, and that's important in aggressive decks because you can keep things going. When you look at the colors that is involved with this creature, it should call to mind things like Token Crusader or Token Mage, and those are decks that typically have a board that goes wide, and then you buff them with things like Divine Fervor, for example. So the smaller stat line, a little bit less relevant if you're going for a token strategy, and that might be entirely viable. This also has Prophecy, and when you again look at the colors, both Prophecy Mage and Prophecy Battle Mage have been deck archetypes. You could see the emergence of maybe a 75-card Prophecy style deck. So all of the components of this card have the potential to matter. Now, we don't know what the rest of the set looks like, and that's going to kind of shape how and where this fits, but I like that thematically you can see where this aligns with the colors and the different deck archetypes that you would imagine in this color combination, in this yellow, blue, red monstrosity. And this card has me excited. So, you know, for a 2-cost 1/2, this is a very impressive way to lead things off as far as card reveals in my mind. The second card that they revealed on the panel was one that showcased a brand new mechanic, a brand new ability coming with Alliance War. This is Covenant Mail. This is a 3-cost endurance item, and it has Prophecy, Mobilize, and Guard. And Mobilize is the new keyword specifically for items that is coming in Alliance War. And as you can see on the screen, it says you can play an item with Mobilize to an empty lane. When you do, summon a 1/1 recruit and equip the item to it. So essentially, this is a 3-cost item that provides +1, +3, and Guard, or you can choose to play this as a 2/4 creature with Guard. Now, that's pretty interesting, right? Because this card has Prophecy, and in the past, with the exception of the Spear, we haven't had items with Prophecy because it feels really bad if Prophecy triggers and you've got no creatures to play the item on. However, this card, if you have Prophecy and you have no creatures, you can just play it as the actual creature. I'm curious to see exactly how many silence effects end up in the new set, because Mobilize is one of those abilities where it's really interesting and has the potential to be very, very neat, but also is very, very punished by silence effects. Now, items have always been punished by silence effects, don't get me wrong, but the fact that any card with Mobilize, let's just say hypothetically there's some really awesome legendary weapon that also has Mobilize in the set. Any card with Mobilize is essentially killed by Sorcerer's Negation or Earthbone Spinner or the Halalu Sharpshooter. So I'm very curious to see how many more of those effects make their way into the game. Or conversely, I'm curious to see if we get more ways to protect against said effects, because I think that's going to make or break how useful some of these cards are. I'm also very excited to see what kind of other item synergies pop up. Item decks have been the sorts of things that are popular, not necessarily powerful, but people enjoy playing them. Item Sorcerer, for example, has a lot of potential to just do insane things if it goes uninterrupted, unhampered. You can draw your entire deck. You can keep the enemy super shackled. We recently saw the Dragonstar Rider OTK deck kind of pop up, and again, not necessarily super powerful, but can be a lot of fun. So when I see items and things that interact with items, it makes me a little bit excited, right? Because it's one of the places where like combos have existed for a long time. Even if you go back to the core set, just playing like item Battle Mage and hoping that you can play your Horseman on 2 and then like super item him up and attack for a ton was like a mini combo, right? And I don't know, there's a soft spot in my heart for stuff like that. So I'm hoping that at least some of these Mobilized cards end up being viable. This one in particular I think is very, very good in Arena. I don't think that this one will end up being constructed playable unless there are other mechanics that boost it, because a 2/4 for 3, even with Prophecy and Guard, just isn't good enough. There's a reason that the Camlorn one doesn't see play, for example. And no, it is worth noting that all the items with Mobilize are pseudo chargers. And what I mean by that is that items are like creatures that have charge. They're just conditional because you have to play it on an existing creature. So when it comes to like immediate stats and value, a 2/4 creature with Guard isn't necessarily good enough on its own to be played. But if you were to say to me, you can have a 2/4 creature with Guard, or optionally you can play it as a 1/3 creature with Guard and charge, then, you know, maybe that flexibility is enough to make it good or playable. Again, in this particular instance, I'm not sure that Covenant Mail will see a ton of constructed play unless there are other cards that drastically boost its playability. But I think that it's a very good card in Arena. I think most of the Mobilized cards will have an opportunity to shine in Arena because of their versatility, and because you're not being punished very hard for the versatility the way that you kind of are sometimes with the Exalt creatures. So I'm excited to see this mechanic, and I'm really excited to see what other cards get printed that have Mobilize. But this was the second card revealed. Let's go ahead and move on and take a look at the third. Channeled Storm. This is a 3-cost blue action that deals 3 damage to a creature, but it showcases a brand new mechanic in Empower. Now you can see on the screen here, Empower is something that triggers when your opponent takes damage. Actions with Empower increase in effect for that turn. This particular one has Empower +1 damage. What was explained during the panel is that Empower scales, right? It stacks. So if you have 4 creatures on the board and you attack your opponent 4 times, and then you play Channeled Storm, you're paying 3 to deal 7 damage to a creature, because each time that the creature dealt damage to an opponent, that's another Empower stack for the turn. So as you can imagine, Empower, depending on the cards that are printed, could be very, very cool for combo decks. And there's also going to be a lot of interesting ways to trigger Empower, not just from creatures, but creatures' abilities. So things like Fiery Imp or Reeve will trigger it multiple times. Things like Crossbow. Essentially, think of all the ways that you would use to abuse Pilfer, and that also works for Empower, but also think about things like Gladiator's Arena, right? So where Pilfer, when you were abusing Pilfer, it had to be the creature that dealt the damage, right? Empower is like Pilfer for actions. However, the damage can come from anywhere. So again, Gladiator's Arena, or, you know, my old nerfed buddy, Dark Rift, Dank Rift, if you will, that used to be very, very popular until it was nerfed to a 3-cost card. That's another way to trigger Empower. We might see that card come back in terms of playability. And other effects that might deal damage at the start of your turn, or deal additional damage, or do it in increments. I know that during the panel they mentioned Swindler's Market a few times. There's going to be very fun, very interesting ways to trigger Empower. So I'm excited for the mechanic, and I'm going to keep a very close eye on the cards that have Empower listed, because I feel like somewhere, some way, there's going to be a combo deck centered around Empower, but it's going to depend on the cards that are printed, because going all out to trigger your Empowers doesn't matter if all you're doing, for example, is using Channeled Storm. It's nice to get value out of Channeled Storm, and this card is good. I think Channeled Storm will see play. This is a very tempo-friendly card, where if you're playing early creatures and then you want to protect your creatures, this makes an awful lot of sense, right? Get a couple of cheap creatures on the board. If they play a big, you know, blocker or something that they're trying to set up value trades with, you can cheat some damage in and then nuke this at, you know, a reduced cost, if you will. But whether or not like that's good to center your entire deck around is questionable. But if there are other actions, right, that deal damage to your opponent and not just creatures, or, you know, buff your creatures, like if there's something that's like give a creature +1/+1 and it has like an Empower of an additional +1/+1, then suddenly that could be entirely relevant, right? Like that could set up some really interesting burst combos. So I'm going to keep a close eye on the cards with Empower and what they do, and I'm excited for the mechanic. I think, like I said, this card is certainly playable. It'll be very good in Arena. It's a common. I think that in certain tempo decks it will at least be considered. It is not quite Lightning Bolt in that it doesn't provide reach. You cannot target the opponent. You could do fun combo-y things with Uncano in this, specifically because Uncano costs 8 and Channeled Storm is 3. You can play the combo from hand, potentially, if you want to use a huge Channeled Storm to nuke your opponent through breakthrough damage. Yeah, anyway, it's an exciting mechanic. I think this card will at least see some play, but I'm more excited about the cards I haven't seen yet, and that is what I'm looking forward to as far as the Empower mechanic goes. Now, let's move on to some more reveals. The next reveal is our first look at one of the new Oathman. This is for the Dominion color grouping. Dominion is going to be Agility, Intelligence, Willpower. Dominion Oathman is a 1-cost 2/2 in Agility. If you have a Willpower card in play, it gets drained. If you have an Intelligence card in play, it deals 2 damage to your opponent. This card is very, very good, and I like it because it has the potential to be good in both aggressive decks and in control decks. If you're playing Dominion Control, being able to spend 1 Magicka, deal 2 damage to your opponent and gain 2 health and have a 2/2 drain is pretty significant, right? You get a little bit of health gain. It's very, very cost effective. And then you put a creature with drain on the board that your aggressive opponents will want to deal with because they don't want you to continue to drain, right? The fact that it's a 2/2 stat line means it does trade very well. It trades up, again, in terms of being cost effective. This is a 1-drop that can potentially trade into 2-drops, some 3-drops even. So I like that. The other reason I like this card is because it's an Oathman I can see played outside of the actual tricolor combination. Powerful Oathman, even ones like Hlaalu Oathman, are still typically only played in the tricolor deck, right? Tribunal Oathman has seen play, but it's usually only played in Tribunal. Hlaalu Oathman has seen play, usually only played in Hlaalu. Dominion Oathman is the kind of card that I 100% could see played in just straight Assassin. The 2/2 stat line for 1 and dealing 2 damage to your opponent when it enters play is very, very strong. And In a burn style assassin, what I mean by that is one that uses a lot of direct damage, talking lightning bolts, ice spikes, things like that. This card fits right in, and it helps your aggressive tendencies. I like this card very, very much. I do expect this card to see play, and if anything, this just confirms that yes, we're still going to see Oathman. We're going to get one for each of the combinations, but this is, again, a very powerful one to reveal and lead off with, because I expect it to see play. As all things, depends on what else is in the rest of the set, but just based on what we've seen so far, this card is pretty good. It's also worth noting that the comes into play effect is another way to trigger Empower. So I know we just talked about Empower with the previous card, and this is yet another way to trigger that. Ice Spike, Lightning Bolts, all those direct damage abilities and or summon effects will also help stack your Empower, because Empower does not care about the source of the damage like Pilfer does with creatures. So overall, very good one drop. This is very exciting, and let's move on to some more card reveals. The next card they revealed on the panel was the first of the unique legendaries that they showed off. This one is the unique legendary that is tied to the willpower, agility, and endurance tricolor combination. This is Clivia Tharn. She is a 6-cost 4/4. Other friendly creatures in this lane have guard, so the creatures that are around her try to protect her, protect the queen. And at the end of your turn, you summon a 1/1 recruit in each lane. Now, the one that's in her lane, because it's an aura, will pick up guard. The one that goes in the other lane will just be a 1/1 recruit. Don't know if a recruit is going to matter. It is worth noting that for the Mobilize mechanic, if you will, that makes recruits. So we might see some sort of mention of recruits or tribal. Keep an eye out for that. If not, no big deal, but it does share a creature type, so kind of worth noting. But the important thing here is that this is in willpower, so playing things like Divine Fervor make an awful lot of sense if you're trying to make free 1/1s. This is also in willpower, so combining Clivia with something like Jarl is interesting, just because you can start spamming and flooding the board with tokens. I don't know how I feel about this card. Paying 6 for a 4/4 doesn't feel great, because Lightning Bolt is a thing, and there's a lot of other ways to deal 4 damage. Channeling a Storm is going to be pretty easy to do for 4 going forward, and that's even cheaper than Lightning Bolt, so it is a heavy investment. Technically, you're getting a 6/6 worth of stats out of it, because you are going to make the 2/1/1s, but, Tullius, for example, doesn't see a lot of play, because he's a 2/2 body who makes a couple of 2/2s, right? But he's very brittle, and even though he leaves the bodies behind and you get a 6/6 worth of stats, it's oftentimes just not good enough. I have a feeling that Clivia might end up falling into that same category. Again, it's going to depend on what else is in the set, what other synergy cards exist that you might want to abuse and use with Clivia. But my initial instinct, again, just based on cards that currently exist, is that this is just not going to be good enough to see a competitive level of play. Mostly because I just don't know what kind of deck this goes into. This isn't great in an aggressive deck. You get no immediate value. It's not big stat line. It doesn't help advance your tempo clock, if you will, for finishing off your opponent. So it doesn't belong in an aggressive deck. In a mid-range deck, it doesn't really help you out, because you're not generating like turnaround pressure. Like normally in a mid-range deck, around turns 4, 5, and 6 is when you're trying to get control of the board and kind of swing things in your favor. You're trying to pivot into the aggressor because you've used your efficient creatures to kind of fight for control of the board and then pivot. Clivia doesn't really help you do that. And in a control deck, on 6, that's usually when you're trying to stabilize. So you're playing your Ice Storms or something else to slow your opponent down. And then, maybe afterwards. So this is one of those interesting things, right? This might be a 6-cost card that you actually want to play on like turn 8 or 9 after you stabilized. But then, even still, is this any better than any of the other cards that kind of create inevitability for you? I don't know. So again, my initial instinct right now is that it's probably not very good, but we're going to wait and see what other cards get revealed. Again, the fact that it is specifically a recruit, and we know that Mobilize also creates recruits, means it's something to keep an eye out for. We might also look for other token synergies. It's also possible that maybe this particular color combination cares about having creatures present in both lanes, and she routinely creates cards in both lanes. That could be a thing. Might be the kind of deck where, you know, maybe General Tullius does start to matter. Maybe Midnight Sweep starts to be more attractive. If we do get more cards that benefit from the presence of cards in both lanes, then maybe Clivia rises in value. But right now, initial responses, I'm not super impressed, but it's a unique legendary and it's always exciting to see those. So this is Clivia, and we're going to move on to the next reveal. The card that they showcased after Clivia was another card with Empower, so that you can kind of get a feel for the different kinds of things that Empower might be doing. And this card is Spoils of War. This is everything Daring Heist wanted to be. This is a 5-cost action that simply says draw 2 cards, but the Empower is it costs 1 less. So if you deal a bunch of damage, if you're playing an aggressive deck, you attack with a bunch of creatures, this could be a very cost-effective way to refill your hand, because again, 5, kind of expensive, but if you pay like 1 or 2 to draw 2 cards because you've attacked with, you know, a fair number of creatures, suddenly that's pretty impressive. I mean, if you think about the kind of openers where, you know, if you have the Ring and you open with like double Scouting Patrol, I know that that's kind of a weird scenario, right? But like, let's just say hypothetically, you have the Ring, you open with double Scouting Patrol, and then next turn, all 4 tokens get to attack the opponent. You could literally play Spoils of War for 1 to draw 2 cards and still have Magica left over to play more 1-drops or 2-drops because you had the Ring. That just seems fun, right? It's cheeky, like combo-y fun. So I think Spoils of War is at least good enough to experiment with. I think that aggressive decks will end up liking it an awful lot. I do like the risk-reward nature of it, where, you know, paying 5 for it doesn't feel great, but conversely, there might be games where you just need to pay 5 for it and it still might get you what you need. It's an interesting card. I don't have a lot more to say about it because, let's be honest, it just draws cards, but it's certainly a step in a direction that I like, in showing that Empower isn't necessarily always going to just be like a blanket +1 to something, right? Might not be +1 attack or +1 damage. It can also be cost reduction or other things. And so that's what I liked most about this reveal, is that they're showing you that Empower has more than one way that it can be implemented, and that's why I think this mechanic excites me the most so far, because it is so interesting and dynamic, and again, depending on the kinds of cards they print with Empower, can end up being really, really neat. So it's one that I'm paying attention to. So this was Spoils of War, and we're going to move on to another tricolor card now. Daggerfall Phantom is a 2-cost 2/2, and it is in the Strength, Intelligence, Endurance, or red, blue, purple color combination. And it's just a 2/2 that has Last Gasp, return all items equipped to Daggerfall Phantom to your hand. This is interesting, but I really, really wish that Sorcerer's Negation and Silence effects weren't a thing, because they're going to stop the Last Gasp portion. Cast into Time will also prevent the Last Gasp portion, but if you can get the Last Gasp to go off, I like this card. It has a lot of combo potential. Again, it's a cheap card that covers all the combos, so paying attention to the Oathman I think is going to matter a lot in terms of viability of this card. I like that this is yet another way that they're trying to give you value out of your items. Cards like Gardener of Swords and other cards like Dragonstar Rider have always existed as a way to kind of mitigate the 2-for-1 scenario that playing an item typically creates. Usually items feel bad because you play an item, and then if that creature gets removed, you've spent 2 cards and your opponent has spent 1 card to deal with it, and like I said, it's a 2-for-1 scenario. So in theory, this Last Gasp helps negate that, right? Because you're going to get all those items back. The reason that I'm excited about this card is because it is in blue, and that has a lot of self-sacrifice effects. So I'm excited to see how many ways I can abuse items that have summon effects. Think like Enchanted Plate, or even just tomes, right? Stuff that lets me draw cards or whatever the case may be. and then I can sacrifice this creature and get them all back. So as like a digging engine, if you will, I think that this card has an awful lot of potential. Again, I've talked about the Dragon Star Rider combo deck a little bit in the past, and that is an interesting deck because you kind of don't care about what the items are. You're just trying to pile as many items on creatures as you can. Now, if you imagine a card like this, where you've just stacked like 10 items on this and then you self-sacrifice it and you get all of them back, then you're going to be able to dig that much further, that much deeper into your deck. I think that, again, it's probably not going to be good enough to see constructed level play unless there are significant changes made to cards like Sorcerer's Negation, unless things like Earthbound Spinner and Cast into Time become less popular. But again, like, I'm excited to at least see what kind of combos I can pull off with this card. I just don't think that it'll be like competitively viable. Could be wrong. Again, we have not seen the full set. Maybe some other cards will pop up that will show us some pretty cool synergies with items, and maybe that will be a greater focus. The color combination, the red, blue, purple color combination, is kind of centered around items. So I do expect to see more item-centric cards. That's why Mobilize is a thing. That's why we're getting cards like this. I think that, you know, at a minimum, we're going to see cards like Gardener of Swords rise in popularity just because of the presence of this new color combination. So, you know, again, Sorcerer's Negation's a thing, Cast into Time is a thing, but I'm still excited to try it out. I'm just not super thrilled about the potential competitive impact that this card will necessarily make. But anyway, let's stop being a downer. Let's go ahead and take a look at the last two cards that they revealed on the panel, because both of them were unique legends and they're pretty exciting. So let's look at them. The Skald King is going to be our representative of the Strength, Endurance, Agility tricolor combination. The King was a Nord and a Bard, and that's represented on the card pretty well in my opinion. So this 5-cost 5/5 is a Nord that is also immune to silence, just like other Bards so far in Legends. Also, friendly creatures cost 1 less, enemy non-creatures cost 1 more. Now, if you think about our neutral Bard, for example, that makes creatures cost 1 less. So again, that kind of Bard ability, that Bard representation matters here. Making creatures cost 1 less is also a form of ramp that has existed in Agility for a while with things like Thieves Guild Recruit. And I just really like how this card encompasses all three of the colors really well. When I think about Magicka, Manipulation, and Ramp, I think about Scout, right? Agility and Endurance. When I think about hampering my opponent's Magicka, I think about Strength. So cards like Withered Hand Cultist and Garnag, and now the Skald King will all do that. And I'm kind of chomping at the bit to build a deck that does both. I mean, extreme levels of Magicka Manipulation. I want to ramp my own, and I want to make everything for my opponent cost more and just annoy the ever-loving crap out of them. So this card makes me smile. I think that, you know, a 5/5 for 5 in the past has not been great, but if the effect is powerful enough, it's totally worth it. Again, I think this effect is certainly powerful enough. This is you know, as good as an Iron or an Anasi in my book, so I think that that's fine. But I'm just very happy that this card represents all three colors as well as it does in my mind, and it excites me. Can't really say I'm going to build a deck around it though, because it doesn't enable new strategies, right? It's just building upon existing themes that were in these colors, but you know, it's good. It'll see play. If that's all you want to know, will this card see play? This card will see play. You'll see this a lot. You'll see this in mid-range. You'll probably see this in some sort of weird ramp control, because, I mean, who doesn't want to take Ramp Scout and throw Unstoppable Rage in it? That will be a thing. That will be a deck. And this card will be in that deck. So, you know, you'll see this. Get used to it. Get used to seeing the King's face. Yeah, I imagine you're going to see quite a bit of it. And that's it for this unique legendary. The last one that I'm going to talk about is the last card they revealed on the panel, and this is a unique legendary that is just in a single attribute. This is not one of the tricolor ones. So without further ado, Mannimarco is a 10 cost 6/6 endurance unique legendary. It has a summon effect of summon a creature from your opponent's discard pile. This is a very powerful effect for a number of reasons. First, you're going to be denying that creature from your opponent's discard pile. So if you're playing against something like Rage Warrior or any other deck that wants to reanimate things, you're essentially pulling it out of their discard pile. It is only a single card, but if you get rid of Parthenax and you prevent a loop or something ridiculous, that's just good enough. This card also punishes decks that run things like Merchant's Camel, right? Because if they play an early Merchant's Camel and they let Oathman go to the discard pile because it's not what they need on turn 4, you can then play Mannimarco later on and target some of those big powerful cards. However, what's interesting is this card only targets things in the discard pile. So if you're playing Mannimarco against like an aggressive deck and their curve tops out at 5, it's kind of just a dead card, right? Like this is very much either an anti-combo or an anti-control card, or not even necessarily like anti-control, but it's just like that's where you're going to see the value, right? By the time you get to turn 10 against an aggressive deck and against most mid-range decks, you've either won or lost based on whether or not you stabilized. Like your finisher doesn't really matter. You just need to draw a finisher. And I guess Mannimarco has the potential to be one of those, agaginst a mid-range deck. If you bring back their Lava Atronach that they made with Mighty Conjuring or something like that, okay, fine, that's probably good enough. But I guess my point is that you really need your opponent to play powerful things for this card to be powerful. And you have to have answered said powerful thing. And if they're not playing powerful things, then they need to have played something like Merchant's Camel and then discarded it. But if it's just, an aggressive deck who, again, their curve tops out really low and they're playing a bunch of like little bodies, or they're playing a token deck, then this card is not as impressive as it could be. But it's going to be popular because it's a cool effect, and it's going to be popular because it creates big, flashy moments. It's going to be very satisfying the first time you play this and steal an opposing Oathman to wipe your opponent's board, right? If you're playing against Conscription Telvanni, and again, they're Camel discarded Oathman, and then they play Conscription, and then you steal their own Oathman to wipe their board, it's going to feel really good, right? You're going to remember that moment, and as such, I think that this card will see play. Mannimarco, also from ESO, is just a well-known character, so I'm sure that there will be people that will want to play the card just because they like the character, and yeah, it'll be popular. It'll see play in certain decks, but I just want to mention that this isn't like a, amazing, good in every situation, every scenario kind of card. The times that it's good, it's going to be really, really good, and then other times it's just going to be dead. It's going to do nothing and sit in your hand, or it'll be a really lackluster 10 Magicka spent. So it's interesting. It's also worth noting it does cost exactly 10, so if you are running cards like A Night to Remember or Dark Rebirth, you could potentially play this from hand and then immediately get an additional summon out of it with A Night to Remember. If you have the ring, you can do Dark Rebirth. Because it's an endurance, you're probably playing some sort of Magicka ramp where you are increasing your max Magicka, and then you can open up additional plays. Again, keep an eye out for stuff like that. All that goes back to what I was saying, right? Like, this is the kind of card that's going to create big, flashy moments. And when that happens, it's going to feel good and you're going to remember it. But I do also see this as being a double-edged sword kind of card, because the times when it's dead, it's going to be pretty dead. It's going to feel not great. So this is Mannimarco. This was the last card that was revealed during the panel, but we have had one other card revealed, as I said at the beginning of the video, and that was done by Matt Oblivium today on his stream. That card is Altmer Flamesinger, and this is a card that I am excited about for a wealth of reasons. This is a 2-cost 1/3. It has Ward. It says at the start of your turn, Altmer Flamesinger deals 1 damage to your opponent. There's a lot going on here, even though it seems pretty straightforward at the beginning, right? 1, this is a great way to trigger Empower. You're going to get the 1 damage at the start of your turn. That's an Empower stack. When this creature attacks, It's also going to add another Empower stack. That's great. So again, if you're looking at maybe the Dominion colors, if you're looking at Assassin and some sort of Burn Assassin that's going to use Empower, or even just Burn Assassin because this provides a source of direct damage, you're going to want to consider this card. This card also, because the creature is the source of damage, works really well with Pilfer effects. Now they have to be Pilfer effects that you're granting to this card, and they have to be permanent Pilfer effects. So Crusader's Assault, not helpful, because this is at the start of the turn that you get the extra trigger, but things like Thieves' Den or Duskfang, you'll get an awful lot of value out of on a card like this. But perhaps the reason I'm most excited is it's just a cheap creature with Ward, and it's in the common slot, so it's going to be very good in Arena, and it's very good at carrying items. And as somebody who plays a lot of Sorcerer, and that has loved Satanin for some time now, Satanin Courier is great at giving items to creatures with Ward. This is another target for that, right? This is a cheap creature that if I give an item, or I give a sword from Satanin, we'll be able to trade up very effectively and leave a quality statted creature on the board. I think the 3 health is relevant. Unlike Daggerfall Mage, unlike Windkeep Spellsword, this actually survives Sorcerer's negation. Now, it's going to leave you with a 1/1, so I'm not like, woo, but that matters, right? The 3 health potentially matters. So I am very excited for this card. I think it's going to have a home, as I said, in Empower decks, in Burn Assassin. I'm probably going to try it out in at least Sorcerer at some point. It's a really cool card that I already want to put in a number of decks, and that's seeing very little of the upcoming set. So I like this card, and I was excited to see Matt reveal it, and there's going to be more coming. So I talked about it at the beginning of the video, but here's your reminder. Tomorrow at 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on my stream, I'm going to be revealing another card, and I will also put out a YouTube video covering said card reveal. So I'm going to tease the art. We're going to end the video with me just putting the card art up on the screen. Maybe it'll spark some ideas for you on what you think the card might be. But if you made it this far, thanks for watching, and until next time, may you walk on warm sands.